I'd like to go ahead and open a public hearing to reconsider an ordinance to reapportion representation in the governing body by redrawing the county magisterial districts and precincts pursuant to the census of 2020. We have Mr. Matt Miller to present the new lines.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Matt Miller with the Roanoke Valley Alleghany Regional Commission, or at least I used to be. I'm in a new position now, but I'm finishing this up. And it's hard to believe that this is, I think, the third time that I've done this for the county, which we do every 10 years. So redistricting, as many of you know, is sort of controlled by regulatory statutes in state and federal code, as well as a great body of judicial judgments and interpretations of how district lines should be drawn. And basically they have to be fair, compact areas that are not arbitrary and don't discriminate against different groups of people. And I'm not going to go into all that, but the basic concept is you want one person, one vote. So that's why we do the redistricting, is so that the districts all have equal population. So this last sentence on this screen is very important because that's what triggers us to examine and redraw these boundaries. So it's a little bit hard to understand the first time you look at it, and I'll explain it on the next slide. But the maximum population deviation between the largest and smallest district must be less than 10%, as interpreted by the courts. So if that is true, then the one person, one vote concept is acceptable. So deviations above 10% are not allowed. So what we do is we take the current districts, meaning the ones that you've used the last 10 years, and we look at the 2020 population numbers for those districts. And I think there's a large map in your packet that shows what we're proposing and the old districts. But on this screen, I have overlaid the population deviations. The one on for Falling Spring is a little bit hard to read, but it says 10.1% on Falling Springs, and there's a minus 10.8% on the western Clifton Forge. So when we total these up, that comes to 20.9%, which is almost double what's acceptable. So another way to look at that is using the 2020 numbers. The population of the county is 15,223 divided by the 7 districts. The ideal district should be 2,175 people. So that gives us a range of about 217 people that each district needs to be within. So in this example, the Falling Spring is 10% over, so it's about 200 people too high. Sharon is about 5% too less, so it's about 100 people too less. West Clifton Forge is 10% under, so it's 200 people too less, and so forth. Jackson River is about 150 people too much. So we have to shift these boundaries around to move people from one district to another. It's sort of a puzzle in a way. And that's what the redistricting committee worked on a few weeks ago in moving some of these boundaries. The boundaries must follow the census block boundaries. This is a map that just shows what those boundaries look like. It's basically all the roads, streams, railroads, power lines, any identifiable feature on the ground. In some cases, they're old municipal boundaries that are retained. So those are the lines that we're limited to when we look at these boundaries. So the goal of the redistricting committee was to adjust the population so it was within those acceptable thresholds, to retain the current districts and precincts as much as possible, to retain the current polling places as much as possible, and then consider the new state and federal districts that were recently drawn up by the state Supreme Court to make sure that nothing was split in Alleghany County, and that seems to be the case in those districts that will split the county. So what changed? I'll just highlight a few of those areas. Parts of Clearwater Park moved from Falling Spring to Covington. So you see that little black dangling, it looks like an arm dangling down. The black lines there shifted from Falling Spring, and they're now in Covington. So that's how we moved some people around. And then most of the changes were over in Clifton Forge East and West, in the Lowmore area. Clifton Forge East changed a little bit there at Cliftondale Park. We added, I think, Verge Street into the new district. And now Clifton Forge West goes all the way down to parts of Lowmore. So those were some of the changes. There is a map online, and this should be in your packet, this web address. If you click on that or type that in, that should take you to an online map. I'll try to bring it up here and see what happens. And that map will show the current districts, the current precincts, the proposed precincts, and the proposed districts. And it'll also show the polling places. It'll look something like this. And I do want to point out there's some tabs here. The map may come up with a legend on the left as proposed option 1 districts and polling locations. To be able to turn the layers on and off, you have to click on this little show contents of map, and that brings up the controls where you can turn layers on and off. There's a base map that allows you to turn on aerial photography, so you can go all the way down and look at houses and neighborhoods and where the old districts were and where the new districts were. So that may be a tool that you all can use going forward. The last slide should be the map that's in your packet, which shows the districts that we came up with. And our total deviation now is 5.6%, which is about half of what the acceptable level is. So that's very good numbers for what we're trying to achieve here without disrupting too much of the existing. Many of the precinct lines, the blue lines, stayed the same internally, so they didn't really alter too much other than the outer boundaries, which we adjusted. So I'm available to have any questions that you might have at the moment.
Board member questions?
Doesn't affect any current elected officials in their districts.
We did not, or at least as a map maker, I did not have instructions to look at any
We did.
current people, so I don't know that if it does or does not.
Nope.
We had Tiny Rose in the meeting with us, so we made sure everybody, it didn't take away anybody. And what we did was clean up a lot. Mr. Griffith and I were together in the meeting. We tried to clean up some things like Clearview and Clearwater Park, where it split sides of the street, especially like in my district, and then Clifton Forge brought some lines down closer to Lowmore, so some of that came off of Mr. Bennett, but then added more into the Covington district,
On
and
the other end.
right, kind of tried to make more sense, where it didn't split rooftops or streets or, different things.
This is option 1. Is there another option?
No, we started with option 1. I think maybe 10 years ago, we had 4 or 5 different options.
Right.
So by the time we were finished, I'll be happy if
So this is
option
it.
1 is the only one.
Do you have, just for reference, do you have on your maps the areas where we had to offset where the growth was and kind of had the western end, was it the eastern end of the county and the Falling Spring district?
Yeah, Fallen Springs was the district we had to move people to Covington, then move people from Covington to Jackson River, then the people from Jackson River to West Clifton Forge.
That's right.
What
There's a little area, if you see I'm turning on and off the old boundaries. These are the new boundaries, those are the old boundaries. So there's a little area over there in the western part of the county by 64, that 64 symbol, which did change. Is that the area you're talking about?
we use the interstate
Yeah,
as
that was,
Yeah,
yeah, that was Covington, and now it's in Fallen Springs.
right.
there had been, and it's a good problem to have, there had been growth, so we had to offset But we don't have to take action on this tonight, is it? Is it still subject to the state approving?
They done
Is it
approved.
finalized?
It's finalized.
Okay. Do you need us to take action on this evening, or?
I don't personally. I would say that would be a,
Is it something
County
to take
decision.
action on without waiving policy?
That's what I was gonna ask, if it had to be done this evening.
Unless there's some concerns, my suggestion would be to consider waiving policy and taking action on it.
This is very rare, Jim. Do we need to waive policy on this, or can we just go ahead and straight up vote?
You have to waive it off.
It's new business, so,
Public hearing.
You have to wait.
yeah.
Usually policy, I think, is that you wait till the next meeting, so you do have to wait it.
I'll make a motion, we waive policy and act on it tonight.
Second.
As a public hearing, does it have to be advertised, Melissa, for the next? It's already, everything's good?
I'm sorry, Matt, I apologize. Yeah, the next step would be to open a public hearing.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Excuse me, I got ahead of myself. We got to follow the rest of this process first.
Right, we have to have another meeting, adjourn to another, we don't,
It's on
Let the public hear comment.
okay, okay. So as long as we follow through tonight, then we can take action after, okay,
After we close public hearing.
okay.
I jumped too far ahead, my fault.
Mr. Miller, thank you, sir.
thank you.
Any board member questions or comments?
It is what it is. You don't have a choice. do you?
We have to do it, yeah. Does the public have any questions or comments about the redistricting?
There you go.
I'd like, if you would, could you come up to the policy, the podium, and give your name and address for the minutes?
Hi, it's Tracy Morris, Falcon Red, Clifton Forge. How quickly and how are people then notified of the changes to make sure that everybody knows exactly what district they're in? And, you know, because you see a lot of confusion sometimes across the country as to what precincts and such. And we may not have that big of a problem in Alleghany County, but I just think voting is very important. So how does the county notify, and how often? Do you send out one letter, that's it? Or how does that happen?
Personally, I think that's a question for Ms. Rose.
Yeah,
Well, we have to send it to the state for approval after the board approves. And then once they approve, then the registrar will send out notices to everybody that's affected.
Okay, so just in general, everybody that's affected will get a letter, just not some kind of
From the
form
registrar.
letter for you to check to see where your polling place is or something. People will actually get a letter that states very clearly where they are to vote. Is that what you're
She
saying?
probably will send a letter with a new card.
Okay,
Yeah, you'll have to show your card at a new
Yeah.
precinct.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And this is the first time
Yeah.
I've dealt with it, so it only happens every 10 years, so.
Yeah,
um,
But I
Anyone-
think the card only goes to the people who have been changed. If you don't receive anything, then you assume you're at the same place.
Falcon Red is right on the edge, and I couldn't tell you if it's in or out. So
yeah, I was looking at the map and it did look very close to
Yeah,
us.
it's pretty
right there,
close.
so.
I don't think we changed in Falcon Ridge. I think it was in Lowmore.
probably shouldn't change, because
Yeah.
I'm 100 people short. Should have picked up something.
we put some in.
I can't remember Falcon Ridge changing it all. I know that we went further into Lowmore and down from Selma with the Clifton Forge
It changed
district.
around Iron Gate for Shannon District.
Tried to make it as the least imposing that we could and not affect, but so many people. So hopefully we just tightened up lines and made it make more sense. Anyone else in the public? Mr. Irvin?
Jeff Irvin, 1261 Commercial Avenue in Clifton. I'd like to ask a couple questions. So what I'm understanding, you took some people off of Verge Street in Clifton and moved them from the East District to the West.
Yes, sir. If you could you pull that map up again?
See if I can get to the computer here.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I think that's right. So Bird Street, so we don't get confused,
Yeah, can you color code it?
I'm going to turn. Bird Street used to be in Sharon, is that right?
No,
Yeah.
It
It
went,
had to be east or west.
yeah, it went from east to west or vice versa.
Went from west to east, I think.
Yeah.
It wasn't in the Iron Gate precinct?
Maybe it was.
a part.
I'm looking
Yeah,
at the
Iron
black
Gate.
lines that are on
That's
the
right.
on the map.
It couldn't have been in the Orange Gate
That's right.
precinct, because nobody from
Well-
Orange Gate voted there.
Yeah, it's, see the precinct, little
Well,
blue dot
actually,
there?
let me back up. Where most people live is this section, right?
Yes,
So that is in Clifton Forge west, is that correct? The eastern part of Bird Street that doesn't have any houses along the river would have been in Iron Gate.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I was
Right, the scale
confused
would be
about.
in.
So now, if we draw
Yeah,
the
that's true.
proposed lines, and turn off the old lines.
Should have been put forth east.
I think I still have the precinct lines on.
Yeah, it went to east.
Yeah.
So it's,
So why, what I can't understand in Clifton, why would you change some voters in the east to the west, and you already have districts in Clifton, like, let's just say Commercial Avenue where I live. Half of it is in the east district, and you go 2 houses up from that, and you're in the west district. I mean, I don't understand how you could,
they also moved the
Because it
line
follows,
from McCormick to Commercial. So it used to be McCormick was the dividing line, now it's Commercial.
It's a number game.
see, the guidelines comes from the US Census.
yes, but the districts, I mean, what,
I'm telling you, the guidelines came from the US, the way the census was done and the blocks they used is the blocks that we had to follow. So when it lit up, that's not information that we just drawed. I mean, we following the census and we had to follow their guidelines.
so it makes more sense to move people from one district to the
I agree
next
with
and
you.
then have one house here in the west district and one, your neighbor in the east. I mean, I don't understand.
Well, Jeff, it happens every 10 years, unfortunately. I mean, we couldn't change the rules or decide this house is in it and this one isn't. They're in zones, so you have to do, it may be 40 people, it may be 10 people, but there's chunks of population that you can only move in X amount, and you have to
And they
offset
also
that.
opened up the west district to more county voters and for our seat. You see what I'm saying?
Yes,
Yeah, because you were short.
You know how many voters that would be?
You were short 200 and something.
yeah, so far.
It was around 200 on all of them.
voters in, it'd be your district, probably,
No, it is.
his district,
yeah.
from
Yeah,
the
he-
county and that would vote on your seat. And how about yours? How many that moved to your district?
I think the dividing line was McCormick, I think they moved it over to Commercial. So it affects, maybe 30, 40 houses.
Your change could only be inside of what percentage point? Between,
Well, we only moved a few hundred people in these districts.
right,
The goal is to make each district equal so that everybody's vote is equal.
Just
And-
because you're listed
And
as,
some, if we have to move 100 people, you gotta move them from somewhere. So most of the boundaries in the county are roads, so it'll always be the case where on one side of the road, it's, you're in one district, and the other side, you might be in another district.
especially in a town or a city, it's going to affect on that
The
division
difference
line.
Between districts of Clifton voters and county voters?
we look at it as county voters.
Yeah, it's all county. It's the different divisions, 7 different divisions of the
Yeah,
county.
I mean, but from the county, how many moved from the county to the
They're
district?
county voters. We don't have anything to do with the town limits.
No, but it's our seats, our 2 seats.
I think your question
They're
is
for
that
the-
there were
they're for
some
the
county
county.
voters that got put in the west.
Yes,
Yeah, what, for Pierre County, got put in the west.
That's why I want to know how many county voters moved over, what
I
the
don't know the
percentage of
number.
county voters to percentage of town voters.
That I couldn't tell you because it was all based on county voters, that we have to do by state mandate.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other? No, the town districts are still divided inside the municipality. Any other public comments or questions? With that, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. I would need a motion to waive policy and take action on
The board's okay with it, I'll
the
make a
approval.
motion.
Go ahead. I'll second.
Motion to waive policy and take action tonight.
I have a motion by Mr. Bennett to waive policy and take action.
Second.
Second by Mr. Griffith. Melissa?
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Dodd?
Yes.
Dr. Goins?
Yes,
Mr. Nicely?
Yeah.
Mr. Griffith?
Yes.
Mr. Garth?
Yes. Now we need a motion.
Now I'll make a motion, we accept them as they were presented.
Have a motion by Mr. Bennett to accept the changes as presented.
Second.
Second by Mr. Nicely. Melissa?
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Dodd?
Yes.
Dr. Goins?
yes,
Mr. Nicely?
Yes.
Mr. Griffith?
Yes.
Mr. Garth?
Yes.
Just.